My dear friends, today we are having our annual meeting, and it is also the feast day of St Luke the Evangelist, the beloved physician. I had been planning already to talk about how we are responding to this critical situation that we find ourselves in, and it seems that we have the wisdom of St Luke to call upon this day. I take that as a positive sign from above. St Luke didn't just write the Gospel that bears his name, he also wrote the Acts of the Apostles, so a very large chunk of the New Testament comes to us from his hands. He was a companion of St Paul, as we heard from our epistle this morning, and there is a remarkable moment in the course of the story in Acts when the language changes and the word we begins to be used. We did this, we did that. So what we have from St Luke is a first-hand account of the first Christians, eyewitness testimony. And one other thing to bear in mind is that whenever someone is named in the New Testament, the convention was that when you were writing a biography of a great man, which is the genre of literature that the Gospels belong to, the writer only named the people that they had spoken to directly. And that's why one Gospel might name someone, but another Gospel doesn't. So we can have confidence in the general reliability of the stories that we have inherited. For a long time, following the revolution in academic studies of Scripture, there was, I believe, something of a drop-off in confidence in our faith, a loss of confidence in Scripture, a loss of confidence in what we claimed more generally. I regard that as one of the roots of the problems that we face as an institution. Last week, the National Church released the latest attendance figures for our church, and they continue to make grim reading. In the last 20 years, attendance in the Diocese of Gloucester has gone down by 28%, which is a phenomenal figure. As the saying has it, if we don't change where we're going to get where we're headed. This is a long-term and deep-rooted decline with many causes, some of which are shared with other institutions, some of which are specific to our own Church of England. This is the situation in which the plague of COVID descended upon us, which has accelerated so many things. We're still in the midst of trying to cope with all that COVID and lockdown and shielding and so on has meant for us, and attempting to fathom what all the consequences will be. But one thing seems pretty clear to me. We will not be going back to what there was before. Now, in some small ways, this can be a good thing. It has triggered a recognition of the possibilities that the internet provides for us, for engaging more fully with those who cannot come on Sunday mornings, or otherwise participate in the shared life of our community. We shall maintain a twin-track approach on that front, continuing to run a ministry online alongside the more traditional ministry here. Yet I think that we need to prepare for some significant changes over the next 2 or 3 years. One impact of COVID is financial. Our income has dropped massively, as has that of other churches. Our deanery is forecasting a significant drop in income as a result, to the extent of the costs of 2 stipendiary posts. Obviously, if the money isn't coming in, then those posts cannot be paid for. In my view, this is only going to get worse, as we are facing a tidal wave of economic consequences over the coming year. When we're in this sort of situation, and so much seems worrying, I remember what Jesus taught about worry, which I touched on last week. And I ponder our gospel reading from this morning. Jesus sends out his disciples to teach the kingdom, and he says they are to travel light. In particular, they are not to take any money with them. Why not? Surely money would be useful to the disciples as they travelled around Israel spreading the good news. Well, I think there's something here about recognizing our utter reliance upon God, and not our own resources, financial and otherwise. The disciples will not succeed in their own strength, but only through grace, and relying upon grace. In the same way, the overwhelming need in our own time is for us to evangelize effectively, but we will not succeed in doing this by increasing our income, however important that might be for other reasons. We will only succeed in sharing our faith if we are ourselves faithful, if we spend time with Scripture and in prayer, if we model what we believe. Paul writes to the church, with Luke at his side, Keep a clear mind in every situation. Don't be afraid of suffering for the Lord. Work at telling others the good news and fully carry out the ministry God has given you. This is what we are to do in good times and in bad times, to keep a clear mind and be faithful as God himself is faithful, to work at telling others the good news and carry out the ministry that God has given to us, to heal the sick and tell people that the kingdom is near. As Paul goes on to say, even when he felt most alone, God was with him, and God gave him the grace and the strength to proclaim the gospel. The health of the church, whether our own church here, or the national church, or the church worldwide, this does not depend on our own strength. And when we believe that it does, I think we place ourselves under a burden which is not ours to bear, and which we cannot cope with. Jesus founds the church, and he says that the gates of hell will not prevail against it. I believe him. We're facing many changes, but we've faced changes before as a church, and no doubt when COVID is an ancient memory, there'll be new challenges to face. We will get through this. Our task is not to wrestle with things that are too great for us. Our task is to hold fast to the living God and give an account of the hope that is within us. Change is coming, but we do not need to be afraid. Paul knows that his time of death is coming near, and he writes this wonderful text. The time of my death is near. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race, and I have remained faithful. And now the prize awaits me. May God give us the strength to fight the good fight in these times that we live through now, and may we gain our eternal prize in the end. Until we meet again. Amen.